You have the wrong mentality for partnership, my boss said, leaning back in his chair with the kind of certainty that comes from never having been challenged. You're more of a worker bee. You'll never be a queen. I smiled politely, shook his hand, and walked out of that office for the last time that afternoon. But 3 years later, when my consulting firm was valued at $780 million and we were actively searching for a CFO, I thought about those words. And I made a decision that would completely alter the power dynamic between us. My name is Jordan Blake. I'm 35 years old. And I own a management consulting firm that my former boss desperately needed to work for. The office where my former boss had delivered his verdict about my future was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston. It was the kind of office that screamed success, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, the subtle intimidation that comes from extreme height and extreme money. My boss's name was Richard Hartwell. He was 58 years old. He'd built a consulting practice that had been modestly successful in the late 80s and 90s, but that had plateaued significantly once the digital revolution truly took hold. He couldn't adapt to the new economy. He didn't understand emerging technologies. He didn't understand how markets were shifting. But he was very good at one thing, making people feel small. I'd worked for Richard for 4 years. 4 years of 14-hour days. 4 years of being told my ideas were not quite there yet. 4 years of watching less talented people get promoted over me because they had the right demographics or the right family connections or simply because they were better at flattering Richard. I'd asked for partnership track 3 times in those 4 years. Partnership at a consulting firm is the holy grail. It means ownership. It means equity. It means your compensation is tied to the firm's success, not just your hourly billing. Each time I'd asked, Richard had laughed. Not cruelly, exactly. But with a kind of bemused pity that was worse than cruelty. Jordan, he'd say, partnership is for people who were born to lead. For people with the right instincts. For people who have that special something. I'd asked him what that special something was. It's hard to explain, he'd said. You either have it or you don't. But what I understood, even then, was that what Richard considered the right mentality for partnership was actually just the right demographic. Partnership at his firm had gone to 5 men in the past decade. 3 of them had connections to Richard's family or social circle. One of them was spectacularly incompetent and was eventually forced out. The only one who was genuinely talented and accomplished had been a man who also happened to attend the same Ivy League school as Richard. I was a woman who'd gone to a good state school. I was a woman who'd built client relationships through excellence, not through golf games. I was a woman who didn't fit the mold that Richard had created for success. So when I walked into his office on a Tuesday morning in March 2020, I wasn't there to ask for partnership. I was there to resign. I'm leaving, I'd said simply. I'm starting my own firm. Richard had laughed. Actually laughed. Jordan, he'd said, that's a terrible idea. You're a consultant, not an entrepreneur. You can manage client relationships, but you can't build an actual business. You don't have the mentality for it. I guess we'll find out, I'd said. I'd walked out of his office and never looked back. The first year of building my consulting firm, Blake & Associates, was brutally hard. I started with 2 other people I'd worked with at Richard's firm, Michael and Sarah, both brilliant, both tired of Richard's limitations. We had 1 client initially. Just 1. A mid-sized manufacturing company that was trying to understand how to integrate technology into their supply chain. I'd worked with them before at Richard's firm, and they'd specifically asked if I could consult for them independently. We worked out of a tiny office in a less expensive part of Boston. 200 square feet. Michael and I shared a desk. Sarah worked from home 3 days a week. We made barely enough to cover our overhead. But we were good. And more importantly, we believed in what we were building. By year 2, we had 12 clients. We'd hired 4 more consultants. We'd moved to a slightly bigger office. Our revenue had grown to $8 million annually. By year 3, we had 47 clients. We'd hired 32 employees. We'd opened a second office in New York. Our annual revenue was $124 million. And that's when things started accelerating in ways I couldn't have predicted. The firm I'd thought would stay modest, scrappy, and focused on deep client relationships had started becoming something bigger. Consultancies that are good at what they do tend to attract attention. We started getting acquisition interest from larger firms. We started getting investment offers. We started being written about in trade publications. By the end of year 3, Blake & Associates had been valued by potential acquirers at between $600 million and $900 million. We'd received a formal acquisition offer for $780 million from a major consulting conglomerate. I'd turned it down. Michael and Sarah had initially been shocked. We could retire, Michael had said, looking at the numbers. We could, I'd agreed. Or we could see how big we can actually make this. How big? Sarah had asked. As big as we want, I'd said. So we decided to stay independent. We decided to continue building. We decided to see if Blake and Associates could become one of the major consulting firms in America, not by being acquired, but by growing organically. And that meant we needed a CFO. Financial leadership at our scale required someone with experience managing large portfolios, understanding complex accounting, navigating institutional relationships with banks and investors. Michael was brilliant at strategy. Sarah was brilliant at client relationships. But neither of them had the financial acumen required to manage a $780 million firm. We needed someone exceptional. Someone with CFO experience at a major firm. Someone who understood the dynamics of a consulting business. I made a list of potential CFOs. 15 people from various firms around the country. People who were known for excellence. People who'd led finance teams successfully. And then I thought about Richard. Not Richard the boss who dismissed me, but Richard the financial operator. Because despite his limitations as a leader and his total inability to understand where the market was going, Richard was genuinely excellent at financial management. His consulting firm was profitable. He paid himself extremely well. He'd built something that sustained itself financially, even if it wasn't growing. He had the skills I needed. Even if he was the last person on earth I wanted to work with. But that was precisely the point. I called him on a Friday afternoon. "Richard," I said when he answered. "It's Jordan Blake." "Jordan," he said, surprised. "It's been what, 3 years? How are you doing?" "Well," I said. "I'm calling because Blake and Associates is looking for a CFO. I think you'd be perfect for the role." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "You're joking," he said finally. "I'm not," I said. "The role reports directly to me. It's a significant opportunity. The compensation is $400,000 annually, with a path to equity if you perform well. I'm going to have our HR department send over the formal job description and offer letter." "Jordan," he started. "I should tell you," I continued, "that this offer is contingent on you understanding something. You said I didn't have the mentality for partnership. You said I was more of a worker bee. You said I could never build an actual business. I'm offering you this job because I've proven all of that wrong. I've built a $780 million firm in 3 years. And I think you should work for me because working for someone you once dismissed is a good reminder that your assessment of people's potential is frequently inaccurate." "That's not," he tried again. "The offer letter will arrive in your email tomorrow morning," I said. "Think about it. Let me know by the end of next week if you're interested. If you are, we start Monday." I hung up before he could respond. Richard called me back within 3 hours. "I need to talk to you in person," he said. We met at a coffee shop in Boston, neutral territory. Richard looked older than I remembered. His consulting firm had continued to lose relevance. I'd heard through industry channels that he'd been approached about stepping aside, that his board was considering replacing him with someone younger and more forward-thinking. He was desperate, I realized. The world had left him behind. "I don't understand why you're doing this," he said, sitting across from me with a black coffee he wasn't drinking. "I'm doing it because you're good at what you do," I said honestly. "You're an excellent financial manager. I need that skill set. And I want someone in that role who understands the consulting business from the inside." "But I said terrible things to you," Richard said. "I limited you. I didn't believe in you." "I know," I said. "And I'm hiring you anyway. Because unlike you, I don't think my belief in someone's potential is a prerequisite for recognizing their capabilities." He flinched at that. "I need to tell you how this is going to work," I continued. "You're going to report to me. You're going to answer to me. You're going to be one of my employees, not my equal. That's what this role entails. If you can't handle that dynamic, then this isn't for you." "I don't know if I can do this," Richard said quietly. "That's okay," I said. "You don't have to. But I suspect you need this job more than you want to admit. Your firm is struggling. You're struggling. And this is an opportunity to be part of something that's working. That's thriving. That's actually moving the market." He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For everything. For limiting you. For not believing in you. For being such a terrible boss." "I appreciate that," I said. "And I mean it, I do. But I'm not hiring you to absolve your guilt. I'm hiring you because you can do a job that I need done. Whether or not we ever develop a functional personal relationship is almost irrelevant." That was harsh, maybe. But it was honest. "I'll take the job," he said. "Good," I replied. "Welcome to Blake and Associates." Richard's first month at Blake and Associates was awkward. He was reporting to someone he'd once dismissed. He was taking direction from someone he'd told didn't have the right mentality for leadership. He was working in an organization that was thriving in ways his own firm wasn't. But he was also excellent at his job. He immediately identified 3 major inefficiencies in our financial operations. He reorganized how we were managing our client contracts and billing. He created new financial models that projected our growth potential with much greater accuracy. He negotiated better terms with our banking partners. He was, in short, doing exactly what we'd hired him to do. 3 months in, I called him into my office. "You're doing good work," I said. "I wanted you to know that. You're exceeding expectations in this role." "Thank you," he said. "I want to do well here. I want to prove that I can be part of something that's actually working." "You're doing that," I said. "I'm also going to recommend that the board approve equity compensation for you. If the firm grows at the trajectory we're projecting, that equity could become very valuable." Richard's expression was complicated. Relief. Gratitude. And also, I think, the beginning of understanding what it meant to work in an organization where your contributions were actually valued. "I have a question," he said. "Why did you hire me?" "Really? I know what you said, but I want to understand the real reason." I considered the question. "Because I wanted you to know that your assessment of me was wrong," I said finally. "Not to hurt you. But because I think it's important for people to understand when they've misjudged someone. When they've limited someone based on their own biases. I wanted you to see, firsthand, what I was capable of building. And I wanted you to understand that I was capable of being generous to you even though you weren't generous to me." "That's a generous interpretation of your own motives," Richard said quietly. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just good at building teams. At finding people's strengths and putting them in positions where they can succeed. Even when those people once told me I couldn't do exactly that." Richard nodded slowly. "I'm going to be better," he said. "Starting now. If I ever move into a leadership position again, which I hope I will, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember what it felt like to be dismissed. And I'm going to try to see people more clearly. That's all I ask," I said. Blake and Associates continued to grow. By the end of year 4, we were valued at $1.2 billion. By the end of year 5, we'd had multiple acquisition offers, all exceeding $2 billion. Richard had been instrumental in these valuations. His financial management had created stability and credibility that attracted major acquirers. His guidance had helped us navigate complex corporate structures and regulatory requirements. He'd also become a better person. Humbler. More willing to listen. More aware of his own limitations. I promoted him to Chief Financial Officer with board seat and expanded equity compensation. It wasn't charity. He'd earned it through excellent work. And one day, about 18 months after he joined, Richard came into my office with something in his hand. "I printed out an email," he said. "From 3 years ago. From me to you. Telling you that you didn't have the mentality for entrepreneurship. That you couldn't build an actual business." He set it on my desk. "I printed it out so I could read it every day," he said. "As a reminder of how wrong I can be. How badly I can misjudge people. How my biases can limit my vision." I picked up the email and read it. It was every bit as dismissive and arrogant as I remembered. "I don't need this," I said, handing it back to him. "I know," he said. "But I do. I need to remember. I need to remember that the woman sitting across from me built a company that I could never have built. That I dismissed her potential, and she succeeded anyway. That I worked for her eventually, and she treated me with more generosity than I ever showed her." I nodded. "That's good," I said. "Keep that reminder. And use it to be better." I'm sitting in my office now, overlooking Boston. The Blake and Associates office is on the 45th floor of a glass tower downtown. It's not the same tower where Richard's firm is located, but it's close. It's close enough that if Richard looks out his office window, he can see the building where he used to tell people that I would never succeed. The firm has been very successful. We've had multiple acquisition offers, all over $2 billion. Michael, Sarah, and I have decided to go public. We're planning an IPO for next fiscal year. Our projected valuation at IPO is $3.2 billion. Richard is handling the financial preparation for the IPO. He's doing an excellent job. He's also, I think, genuinely happy. He's part of something that's working. He's part of something that's thriving. And every day, I think he understands what I understood 3 years ago when I walked out of his office, that your potential isn't determined by the people who doubt you. It's determined by your own belief in yourself. I hired Richard not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I wanted him to see what I'd built. I wanted him to understand that I was right and he was wrong. But more than that, I wanted him to understand that being right didn't require him to fail. That my success didn't depend on his downfall. I could have ignored him completely. I could have let his firm continue to decline while mine thrived. I could have had the satisfaction of success without ever looking back. But I think there's more power in the choice I made. In hiring him. In showing him what excellence looks like when you're not limited by someone else's biases. In being gracious enough to help someone who was never gracious to you. When we go public next year, Richard will become very wealthy. His equity stake will be worth hundreds of millions. He'll likely become a billionaire on paper. And every penny of that wealth will be a reminder that he was wrong about me. That I had the mentality for partnership all along. That I was never a worker bee. I was always a queen. I just had to believe it myself.